record, he physically acted upon that thought, feeling, and emotion, correct? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of some evidence towards, hey, listen, when I gave him a thought, feeling, and emotion, what did he do? He physiologically reacted, he physically reacted, and there was an action with it. Now let's try this experiment again. I'm going to take the glass and put it here. Now, without moving your body in any physical way, using only your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, move this water.
Okay.
You can't. So there is a delineation between the two, isn't there? Mm-hmm. There is a separation. Even though thoughts, feelings, and emotions are linked to and related to your actions and behaviors, do they have to be directly correlated or take action as a result of? No. Guess what I do every day? I drive past that bank. Guess what I want to do? Ooh. Yeah, I want to go in there and just rob it. I want to take all the money out of there and so on and so forth. That's my thoughts and my feelings and my emotions. That's what I want to do. But I don't. What prevents my actions and behaviors from following my thoughts? Yes?
The ethics, law,
yeah, the laws, ethics, social norms, trouble. Yeah, the big thing there is I don't want to go to jail because jail's not nice. I like my freedom, and I don't want to go through all that trouble. So absolutely I don't do that. So that being said, then we actually learn to delay our immediate gratification and our impulsivity. Because if I only acted on impulsivity and gratification, meaning the pleasure principle, getting what I want, what would happen to me in a short period of time?
Relapse.
Not only relapse with drugs, but what would happen to me in society if I just took and did everything I wanted to do?
You'd be locked up.
Yeah, I'd be locked up or killed. So to understand why this is so important to human behavior, we have to understand that, listen, just because, and listen, we're all born with impulsivity and immediate gratification needs. When a baby's born and it wants food, it doesn't sit there and go, oh, I see mom's busy. I better hold off a second and wait till mom's not busy. And then what does the baby do when it wants some food?
Right.
It cries and wiggles and grunts and does all that and stuff until what happens? Until somebody comes, the primary caretaker, satisfies that need. What did that just reinforce that baby to do every time it needs to do that? Cry, wiggle, and so on. Did you ever meet a parent and the baby's crying? You're like, oh, I think it needs food. And they're like, no, that's a pee cry. Or that's a burp cry. Or that's a bowel movement wiggle. And you're like, wait a minute, how do you know? Because that mother's there all the time constantly reinforcing that. So remember, everything that you've ever learned, ever, in your entire existence, and ever will learn, is through that pleasure principle. Meaning that for each action, there's a reaction, and it's either positive or negative. If it's positive, that's going to reinforce that action to happen. So babies learn basic communication and getting their needs met by doing what? When they have a need, they act out. That act out is being reinforced. It's either positive or negative. If it's positive, they know that is what's going to elicit that response. Same with you. Every single thing that you've ever learned is through that action. It's called learning. Why is that important, you may say? Well, it's important because as we understand where we learn maladaptive coping, where we learn to not be able to deal with things, that's all learned response. Like I said, the number one cause, or the only cause for addiction and mental illness is one, and there's several things to it, but I'm going to have to elaborate, but really it's primarily two things that create a likelihood or a predisposition towards dysfunction and addiction. One is the inability to delay gratification, accompanied very closely by impulsivity, or the lack of the ability to control your impulsivity. Meaning I have a thought and I just act on it, I don't think about it. And the other one is that pleasure principle. Like I said, the first one is about, hey, I want pleasure, so I'm going to do this. I don't think about it, I just act it out. Think about what addiction is. Isn't it just that? Along with a couple other things, but aren't those two the primary things? And if you think about it, even the people that are addicted, do they know it's bad? Of course they do. They know right from wrong. That's why they feel shame. That's why they feel guilt. That's what propels them to want to use again. If I ask someone who's an addict, shooting heroin, living on the street, hey, is this bad for you? Come on, that's a no-brainer. Of course they're going to say, yeah, this is horrible. Nobody says, wow, this is fantastic. I love living out here on the street. And I love having my health deteriorate and not having any family and all that other stuff. Of course not. So they know right from wrong. But because they're compelled, because of the impulsivity, because of the delayed or the distorted thinking and so on and so forth, that's why I say it's very hard to get clean. It's very easy to stay clean. So then again, when people get clean, because a lot of the facilities, like I said, are geared towards just coping mechanisms. You go through some kind of terrible happening with consequences, and as a result of that, you get clean and sober, and then you go through a program that teaches you how to cope and deal with stuff. Hey, you better go exercise. You better eat right. You got to stay away from old people, places, and things, and so on and so forth. All the stuff that a child would know. And it doesn't take very long to learn all that. In fact, most people already knew that to begin with. So then, if that's as easy as solved by just simply knowing that information, why isn't there a greater success rate with those types of programs? If you know, don't drink, and you know to stay away from the people, then why aren't you? Because of those two aforementioned characteristics that are ingrained in you: impulsivity control problems and delayed gratification. Yeah, you cognitively can go so long, but then once that physiology kicks in and you get the urge, the pleasure principle kicks in. And remember, you don't have the brakes. You don't have that part that says, hey, wait a minute, there's a problem with that, and so on, because you don't have that capacity to delay that gratification because you never learned how. And then if you've never learned how to delay your impulsivity, what's going to happen? Relapse. Relapse. You see that all the time. Oh, I made it a month. I made it 2 months. I made it 3 weeks. But as soon as some kind of emotional turmoil kicks up and the cognitive goes to emotional, what do? Impulsivity control and delayed gratification. They want to escape and they can't control their impulses, and off they go, even though they've been clean for a while. So that revolving door of most treatment facilities is what is problematic. And that's because they're using techniques that are old and outdated and ineffective. That's why it's necessary to have this type of education and understand these types of treatment concepts in order to be able to get past that. Because not everybody is superficial in terms of what they need for treatment. Some people, or most people, are what we call primary addicts or dysfunction. That means they have early childhood trauma. They have early exposure and difficulties with childhood in coping and adaptation through abandonment or all kinds of other dysfunctions that were learned in their family dynamics. That can't be solved through going to meetings and so on and so forth. It has to be dealt with through an internal structure of treatment like therapy, like insight-oriented and cognitive behavioral therapy, and creating a new lifestyle based upon the resolve of those unresolved issues that are creating anger and resentment and pain and suffering. That's the fuel for addiction. And if that isn't gotten to and resolved or decompressed, then guess what? It'll manifest itself through the impulsivity and the gratification or immediate gratification, and the people will continue to use. So that's why we're going over this information. Does that make sense? Because we have to have a reason.